Hello, everybody. Hopefully, my camera quality is not too bad. I've been fighting it a little bit. It looks a little blurry, but hopefully, please tell me in the comments if it's choppy because it looks kind of choppy. I could just decrease the quality. And unfortunately, you won't be able to see in high definition my Bucky shirt. so it has been about a month since I did kind of any internet activity, any podcasts since I really been on Twitter. I put a few things up. I think I had 3 tweets in the last month. Um, but thank you everybody if you're here right now, watching, listening, wherever, however you're doing. I'm gonna be doing a little bit of a different format on the show. Let me make sure everything looks and sounds good. Once again, everybody tell me if anything sounds messed up. But as far as I could tell on my end, everything looks all right. So um, yeah, I was beginning to get frustrated with the internet stuff between scheduling guests, between researching for the show, between being a father, band. Everything had been quite a lot. And when I had my most recent guest cancel, and it wasn't any fault of her own, and I'm not mad, nothing like that. I kind of took that as a sign. I think it's time to just step away, be patient, and enjoy life as it is around me. And I did exactly that for the last month or so. It has been nothing short of phenomenal, and I promise you guys everything's okay. I'll be back on 5 till midnight tomorrow, and I believe I'm going to be on the Patreon episode for Wednesday as well, which should be a lot of fun. But I've been busy nonetheless, and I have been putting stuff on Substack. So if you follow me on Substack, and if you don't, you should. Assuming you're into heavy metal, um, I've been publishing a lot of stuff on Substack about heavy metal, just album reviews and occasionally just like opinion pieces talking about the thing that truly brings me joy, and that's heavy metal music. So, anyways, I hope everybody who has been listening and who kind of been wondering where I'm at, once again, you're doing well. Um, as I said a little bit earlier, I've been doing very, very well. I spent a lot of time with my family, with my mom, my dad, obviously my wife and child. We did a Bucky's trip, which was just awesome. Common Crown finished up a song and it's about ready to go, but we got to get back into the studio. That is me and B kind of got to get back in there and just touch a few things up, and then we'll have new music out very, very shortly. Real looking forward to sharing that with everybody because I just think it's going to be absolutely incredible. And if it's really good right now in like the demo stage, unfinished, unpolished. But by the time it's actually done, it's going to be it's going to knock your socks off. I promise. So, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently around here. I'm probably going to be doing podcasts just on Sunday, and I'm going to start trying to do clips and stuff like that, for throughout the week, because that's the way that I see things being easiest for me at this time. Um, the In Liberty and Health podcast now has celebrated 4 years of existence. So I want to thank everybody so much for um, being here with me on this journey, learning, listening, talking, and listening to me drone on as I am right now, about a number of topics and things that I probably would be embarrassed about 4 years ago and might be embarrassed about 4 years from now. But regardless, you guys are all here with me to learn and listen all along the way with the various guests, and sometimes just me droning on talking to you through this camera here. Um, but it's been really, really cool. I'm not going to promise I'm going to be here on Twitter or talk a whole bunch of shit on Twitter as much as I used to, because I need to limit my use of the internet because I'm like all or nothing all the time, right? So it's good to be back. Like I said, I don't know if I'll be back in the same capacity that I once was because there are just more important things in my life than doing political content. So, regardless, I'm back, and the show's going to keep carrying on, and hopefully, the information I provide is valuable to you. And if you do find it valuable, you should hit that subscribe, and as I put in the pinned comment below, please make sure you like, subscribe, and all that good stuff, because that helps keep this channel going. And please consider becoming a channel member for the lowly price of $2.99 a month, where you can get access to all of Common Crown's live footage. And as I do interviews, I'm going to be posting those for members only, unedited, uncensored, with no ads for you to see, and you can only see those if you're a member. I'll probably be airing them when I do these live streams in the middle of them, around talking about other subjects. But yeah, so like I said, gonna be doing things a little bit differently. So we're gonna be talking about Venezuela, Ukraine and Russia, Israel, and I'll take some listener questions and whatever else on today's show. So yeah, I think that's about it. So without further ado, make sure you hit all the links below. And once again, make sure you subscribed and like this. Please, I really, really appreciate it. Go to tigerfitness.com to get some supplements, all the supplements that I use all the time. Obviously, I swear by them because I work with them. Use code Kyle at checkout. Let them know I sent you. Fox and Sons coffee, of course. Fantastic coffee. My wife drinks it every single day. I drink it a lot of the time as well. And I think that's about it. So, guys, thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, let's get into the rest of today's show. And one more time, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the In Liberty and Health podcast. Very, very stoked to be back and very happy that all you could be here with me. As I said, the break was very, very good. I did keep up with all the events going on around in the crazy world that we inhabit right now. I think I'm gonna have to decrease my camera quality one more time. This kind of knocking the rust off here, as you could tell. Um, but anyways, yes, I've kept up with all the events going on around the world right now, and lots going on, lots to say, lots to see, lots to do. I, I gotta say, I'm amazed that there's still plan trusters this far along into Trump's presidency. That we're still supposed to trust the plan when it says in the title regime change in Venezuela. Is it for sure going to happen? I don't know. We'll see. Um, there's definitely a lot of signals there. Jay Forte and Eddie Grimm, good to see you. But lots of smoke there, if you will. They moved a lot of military assets, different ship carriers, and Trump authorized CIA action down in Venezuela, and they said that land strikes could be coming soon. So that's going to take up a decent bit of the show. I do want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the Argentina bailout, if you can call it that. I've heard various things. I read the article I'm going to read today, but we're going to dive into it a little bit more. And then we're going to talk about Ukraine and Russia very, very briefly, and the canceled meeting between Trump and Putin. And we're going to talk about some of Vance's commentary about how the U.S. isn't a protectorate, and then the whole annexation of the West Bank and how the U.S. wouldn't allow it, and what I think about that. So one more time, if you haven't already, please like the video down below so it keeps going in the algorithm, because the YouTube algorithm makes absolutely zero sense to me. And there's people who are smarter than me that know how to work it. I'm just not that smart. I'm a lot of things. Smart enough to figure out a YouTube algorithm is definitely not one of them. So, as I said in the beginning, I took a little bit of time off. I kept my finger on the pulse of most things, but I was not engaging on Twitter because I just needed to take a little break from content creation. And I think these little Twitter breaks are going to be a little bit more frequent for me. Just because being on the internet, doom scrolling all the time, you don't realize how much time you actually lose just doing that, or at least I certainly didn't. And now looking back at it, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I just spent so much time arguing with people, whether they be libertarians, um, dissident right wingers, which is kind of like my primary squeeze between those two camps, or shit libs, or just quote tweeting people that really don't matter to me and that I don't matter to them on Twitter. It doesn't make any sense. To waste all your time doing that. And yeah, it's entertaining, it's fun for yucks and everything, but it's not even clear that that really grows your Twitter following by doing that. Or at least if it does, I just haven't seen it that well. Or maybe for other people it does, but for me, it definitely did not grow that much from talking all this shit on Twitter. I feel like I got to be doing something wrong here. It's entertaining. I love doing it, but I just I can't spend unlimited hours every single day talking shit on Twitter. It doesn't serve me, and I don't think it serves any greater purpose. Diet Pepsi's absolutely fantastic. So, I guess without further ado, let's get into the first story I had planned out for the day. Where the hell is it? From Al Jazeera. Nope. There we go. Get a mark right there. US carries out two strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats in the Pacific. So, as it said here, I think they said they actually carried out 9 strikes. In the website title, it says, 8th strike, but I believe they kinda cover this a little bit later on. So, this is obviously and I've talked about this on Twitter before I took my little sabbatical hiatus, whatever you wanna call it, that, Marco Rubio is kinda running the State Department at this point, or at least that's how it seems to me, and that Trump really doesn't have a lot going on. I think Trump is just kind of like there walking around, getting his yucks, and then getting his attention, and he's really letting Rubio run the State Department as Rubio sees fit. And as we can see, that's not going very, very well. Why you would think having Marco Rubio run anything is a good idea is just well beyond me and my mental capacities. So, U.S. carries out two strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats in the Pacific. 5 people were killed in the strikes, which were the first to take place in the Pacific Ocean, signaling the expansion of Trump's military campaign. The United States has conducted two more military strikes on vessels alleged to be carrying illicit drugs across international waters, killing 5 people. For the first time, however, the boats in question were not in the Caribbean Sea, but instead the Pacific Ocean. There have now been at least 9 strikes in total, as I mentioned earlier, on bringing the total known death toll to 37. And man, I gotta say, I'm not a fan. Have not been a fan of this from the beginning. I know a lot of people cheered it on, but I think what they're missing is that this definitely is kind of the slow walk to regime change and military action on the ground in Venezuela. They did this in the first Trump administration, and I believe they're going to do it in this administration as well. They're going to go for some kind of regime change. I know there was that news about Marina Corina Machado, where she had won the Nobel Peace Prize for what I don't know. I don't think anybody else knows that she says she wants to go be the governor, or she wants to be the prime minister of Israel or something like that. And she was Bush's preferred candidate way back when she ran in the early 2000s. I covered this with Anya Parmpill on a show about a year and a half ago. So feel free to go check that out where we cover a lot of the Venezuela stuff in detail. But a lot of this kind of heave hoeing over Venezuela and striking these boats in the ocean is just, I think, signaling, flexing the muscle towards Venezuela to let them know that, like, we're coming for you, Maduro. And even in the campaign season, I think before Donald Trump was sworn in, there was that whole hubbub with Elon Musk saying that he was going to go into a boxing match with Maduro. They kind of have it out for Venezuela, and this is because it's a pet project of Marco Rubio, and because they want to, they want to follow the Monroe Doctrine, which I'm really not against. I think it's, a global superpower like the US, like China, like Russia, should have their sphere of influence and sphere of security. There was a really, really good debate with John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs, and I thought it was very, very entertaining. And the thing that I always scratch my head at when I hear John Mearsheimer talk, is whenever he gets to China, he starts talking about how they can't have basically a sphere of influence in East Asia, which is where their country is. But the US can have their sphere of influence and sphere of security here, in like North America and South America. I don't get why we can't. China has their sphere of influence and, I don't want to say Monroe Doctrine, but they have their own area and then we have our own area. Part of the reason why Venezuela is forging ties with Iran, because they get a lot of their military equipment from Iran, and why they're forging ties with China is because they treat them a little bit better than the US. You don't see China blowing up boats and extrajudicially killing people right off their coast. That's the US doing that. Maybe if we quit doing that, we might be able to foster better relations with Venezuela. And yeah, you could say Nicolas Maduro is illegitimate, which who knows, who cares? By all, by all my research and understanding, it seems like he's legit and that he did win the elections. People don't have to like that, but he did. And you can hate socialism, as you know, you're perfectly well within your reason too. But that doesn't mean we should overthrow Venezuela because they pose zero threat to America and they're not even a major drug smuggler. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was a document from not the Department of Health and Human Services, but from the Drug Enforcement Administration, from the Trump administration, saying that the majority of drugs don't come through Venezuela, and that's what the main argument is for striking these boats in Venezuela is that they're narco terrorists. Which where the hell did this term come from? And even if they were, stop them in the waters, get them out of the boats, get rid of the drugs, and then they can have their day in court. I would like to believe that we as Americans are better than the Israelis. We don't just extrajudicially kill people because of reasons. You look at the last 20 years of war, then kind of hard to make that argument that we're not. But we don't do this off our own coast. We shouldn't do it off our own coast. We should, once again, if we believe these people have drugs, which doesn't seem like they really do, it just seems like we're kind of flexing our muscle, then arrest them, seize the drugs, and either send them back to Venezuela or take them here into the United States and put them in prison. I don't think that's entirely unreasonable. You can't just kill people, or at least you shouldn't kill people. Anyways, continuing on. Sorry. On Wednesday afternoon, Defense Secretary or the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, announced the first of the two strikes hit a vessel in the Eastern Pacific Ocean on Tuesday and killed two men. Yesterday, at the direction of President Trump, probably Marco Rubio, the Department of War conducted a lethal kinetic strike on a vessel being operated by a designated terrorist organization and conducting narco trafficking in the Eastern Pacific, Hegseth wrote on social media. There were two narco terrorists aboard the vessel during the strike, which was conducted in international waters. Both terrorists were killed. And once again, they have never once produced any evidence that this was the case. Hours later, Hegseth revealed military had struck another vessel in the Eastern Pacific. 3 more people were killed. The vessel was known by our intelligence to be involved in illicit narcotic smuggling and transiting along a known narco trafficking route and carrying narcotics, Hegseth said, without providing evidence. Once again, without providing evidence. Shouldn't just kill people without providing any evidence. The latest strikes in the Pacific Ocean open a new front in President Donald Trump's growing military campaign against Latin American cartels, fueling questions about the limits and legality of his actions. And once again, I would be perfectly fine with them using military to crack down on drugs and border crossings, and especially like drug trafficking. I'm perfectly okay with the military stopping that. I'm not okay with just blowing people up for the sake of blowing people up. I would like to believe that we are civilized. We are a civilized nation that doesn't just extrajudicially kill people because we think we can do that. I don't know. The anti-war president ain't doing a lot of anti-war things. Anyways, Trump claims authority for strike. During a meeting on Wednesday with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Trump himself addressed the strikes, claiming he needed no authority outside his own to launch missiles in international waters. Normally, the U.S. Constitution gives Congress the exclusive right to authorize military action, but Trump has argued it's his right as commander in chief to confront terrorist threats as he claims drug traffickers to be. He did, however, say he would approach Congress if he moves forward with attacks on overland targets, something he has been teasing in recent weeks. So I want to make sure I got the date on this right. This was the 22nd, so about 4 days ago. It's when this article was aired. We'll probably go back to Congress and explain what exactly what we're doing when we come to land. We don't have to do that, Trump said, turning to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But I think I'd like to do that. He emphasized that an attack on attack on a land-based target may be imminent, which just launching strikes into Venezuela. They admitted this in the first Trump administration. I wish I would have pulled up the source, but if you think that killing people inside their home in their country is going to encourage them to stay there, don't know that it will, because we've already seen a massive outflow of immigration from Venezuela into what they call the Miami industrial complex, where you create a whole underclass of people that are now demanding regime change from the United States to Venezuela because of the massive sanction campaign and Now, seemingly the military campaign against Venezuela, you've seen a lot of immigrants come into Florida. So that all being said, you should shut down the border. At least the Trump administration and the U.S. should shut down its border and not allow these people to come into the country. But also, we shouldn't be forcing them to flee by bombing and having massive sanctions on their country. We should remove those sanctions and allow them to trade with the world. And hell, we should probably foster a better trade relationship with Venezuela because they have a lot of oil. Hey, Drock. I'm never on rule zero or post zero anymore because I took a break over the last month. As I said a little bit in the beginning of the show, uh, it had become a lot to do podcasting. I decided to take a little bit of a break. I don't know when I'll be back to either one of those. Rule zero, it's really hard to make it because either I work on Saturday or that's the only day I get to spend with my family, basically, and only have that to do. So I would like to be back at some point, but I just don't know when that'll be. Anyways, um, if we want to see more immigrants from Venezuela, then I think continuing down this path is actually a good idea. Do I actually think it's a good idea to do this? No. You're encouraging people to flee their country because you're making their living conditions worse and worse and worse. We should give Venezuela like a beneficial status as a trading partner to get more oil from them. And, I'm sure they have other industry that we could benefit from if we had just better trade relations with them. But instead, we're doing everything to encourage them to go be better trading partners and official like allies of China, which I don't really have a problem with China having relationships with other countries and trading with other countries. But really, it should be the US that's doing that, not just China. We should give Venezuela a better offer than China, so that way they tell China to go screw off. That would be like an ideal scenario in my mind, but apparently the Trump administration doesn't see it that way. Anyways, let me enlarge this again. Um, Something serious is going to happen. The equivalent of what's happening by sea, Trump said. All of the US military strikes so far against suspected drug traffickers have been at sea. Critics have questioned that strategy, though, pointing out that the US government's research indicates that most drug trafficking occurs through overland routes and official ports of entry, particularly along the southern border. Human rights experts have also pointed out that the attacks likely violated U.S. and international law, which prohibits extrajudicial killings outside of combat. Labeling someone a terrorist is not legally sufficient to justify such an attack, and the Trump administration has not yet provided evidence of wrongdoing in any of the 9 cases of the boats being bombed. Again, this is exactly what I was saying earlier: is that you can't just kill people, dude. It's not cool, man. Let me remind everybody, please make sure you like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Good to see everybody. I hope everybody's doing well out there. But yeah, you can't just extrajudicially kill people. Um, if you are going to do that, then once again, it's got to be you got to go through Congress. And there's just so many better ways to deal with this. I don't see this working because if you had to do 9 strikes, then clearly you're not you're either not stopping them or you just haven't done enough. And judging by most military campaigns and the way that these drone strikes work, it's just not going to work. You're just killing people to kill people. On Tuesday, 3 United Nations experts issued a joint letter denouncing the bombing campaign, describing it as a breach of the UN Charter. These bombings, they said, do not constitute an act of self defense. Use of lethal force in international waters without proper legal basis violates the international law of the sea and amounts to extrajudicial execution, the UN experts wrote, which, we could sit here and debate all day if the UN's faking gay, which, yeah, it kind of is. But yeah, man, I'm not digging it at all. So, sorry, let me get back to where I was. Um, the long history of external interventions in Latin America must not be repeated. I actually agree. But on Wednesday, Hegseth repeated the administration's argument that drug traffickers are enemy fighters equivalent to armed groups like Al Qaeda, which is hilarious because you could easily find a picture of Donald Trump standing with the leader of Al Qaeda, former leader of Al Qaeda, who's now the president of Syria. Just you can't make this stuff up. Enemy combatants only insofar as they don't serve the U.S. or Israel's goals for the military and U.S. hegemony. Experts, however, have argued that Trump has stretched terrorism label beyond the original meaning to justify ever more aggressive actions. There's a world of difference between these alleged unspecified narcos and Al Qaeda. Brian Finucane, a researcher with the International Crisis Group nonprofit, posted on social media. No armed attack on U.S. like 9/11, no armed conflict, just U.S. government engaged in lawless, premeditated killing. So here they start covering the timeline. A timeline of the boat bombings. The airstrikes began on September 2nd when Trump announced on his social media account that he had ordered a kinetic strike that morning on a small boat traveling through international waters. 11 people whom Trump identified as terrorists were killed in the attack. Their identities were not disclosed, nor was any evidence provided of their destination or cargo. Please let this serve as a notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America, Trump said, accusing the boat's passengers without proof of being linked to Venezuelan gang Aragua. Hopefully I said that right. Um, Which I've heard reports that Trendeagra is not even like active. They have like a presence in some states in the United States, which once again, if you send the military in to deal with them, that I'm perfectly fine with that because drug trafficking gangs in the United States is a issue for the United States. Like you can't have gangs that rule apartment buildings. I'm sure everybody remembers the clip of JD Vance talking to the one news reporter where he had said that they literally took over an apartment building in Colorado. Okay, well, first of all, what are Venezuelans doing in Colorado? Because it's cold there. Venezuela isn't particularly cold, so why are they up there? And two, if they take over an apartment building, I think you have every right to use the military and get them out of there. Like this isn't like they did some libertarian homesteading. They invaded that building and they're trafficking drugs through a community. You could say there's willing buyers, but they're more than likely carrying fentanyl and deadly drugs, so you shouldn't do that. Um, More attacks soon followed on September 15th. Hold on, let me enlarge this again. More attacks soon followed. On September 15th, another strike occurred in the Caribbean, killing 3 people. Then a third strike took place on September 19th, also killing 3. The bombing campaign spilled into the following month. On October 3rd, Hegseth announced a strike had claimed lives of 4 people. 6 more people were killed on October 14th in a fifth attack. The sixth known airstrike was on October 16th, however, was a departure in several respects. The target was what Trump administration described as a submarine, and while 2 people were killed, another 2 survived. The survivors were quickly repatriated to their home countries, Ecuador and Colombia, which I'm fine with. Ecuador's government has since released the survivor, saying there's no evidence he was involved in a crime. I'm not okay with bombing him out of whatever craft he's in, but I mean, if you just expatriate these people, get them off the boat and send them back to their country, okay, that's fine. If they're headed towards the US, which who really knows? I heard Max Blumenthal talk about this, and I didn't look into this personally, but um, according to him, they were not in any capacity, like the boat that the original narco terrorists, quote unquote, were traveling on. They never had any capacity to make it to the US. So these people just got killed, and there was no evidence they were bringing drugs in the US, and their boat didn't even have the capacity to get to the US. They just got blown out of the water. Okay. um, a seventh strike came shortly thereafter on October 17th while the Trump administration, sorry, let me enlarge this again. While the Trump administration had linked previous attacks to Venezuela, it identified 3 people in the seventh strike as members of the National Liberation Army, a Colombian rebel group, which, it is a lot more likely that the drug traffickers were from Colombia. Like they might have been legit drug traffickers coming from Colombia, but, we still don't know. And I still don't think it's right to just extrajudicially kill people. Tuesday strikes also reportedly took place near the Colombian coastline, this time on the Pacific side. Fishermen in the Caribbean region have expressed concern about the recent bombing campaign. Tensions with South American leaders. The string of 9 attacks has heightened the friction between the Trump administration and 2 prominent left wing leaders in South America: Colombia's Gustavo Petro and Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. I know there was a Trump truth, I don't know, whatever the hell you want to call it, a truth post where he said he was cutting off aid to Colombia, which is the right move. I mean, especially if they're, flooding the country with cocaine and other drugs. And not that I think these drugs should be illegal, but I don't know. Something about bringing drugs into a country just doesn't seem right to me. Um, Drugs don't really make the country a better place. And I know there's probably libertarians losing their mind over me saying this, but um, bringing drugs into a country with intent to distribute them, that doesn't seem like some kind of free market, laissez-faire, capitalist activity. I mean, it seems like you're coming in the country to make people sick, and then you're taking that money back home. So yeah, I'm sorry if I don't want people just come into the country just to sell drugs. Like that doesn't seem like the kind of immigration or people you really want in the country. But, to the larger point, a lot of this obviously is once again aimed at the Monroe Doctrine style foreign policy, which once again, I'm not necessarily entirely against. I'm against interventionism for the sake of overthrowing these other countries. So, like I said, it is good on the Trump administration for stopping aid to Colombia because I know they're like an official partner of the US, but we shouldn't be killing their people. We should just not be sending them aid. And if they send drugs here, you seize those drugs and then you send those people back home. If that's happening for Venezuela, which by most accounts it's not, you do the same thing. Earlier this month, Venezuela's representative to the UN, Samuel Ronaldo Moncada, appealed to the international community to stop the bombing campaign. We're here to avert the commission of an international crime, Moncada told the UN Security Council. Already tensions between the US and Venezuela are high. Both countries have increased their military presence along the Caribbean Sea since the bombing campaign began. Trump and Maduro have had a long adversarial relationship. Um, Stretching back to the Republican leader's first term when he sought to implement the campaign of maximum pressure on his Venezuelan counterpart. Upon returning to office for a second term this year, Trump increased the bounty he had previously introduced to Maduro's arrest to $50 million. So I don't like. What do you think's going to happen if you put a bounty on a foreign leader's head? Like that's a threat. You're threatening someone's life. $50 million, and what's going to happen if, let's say, a ragtag group of individuals who love Trump want to go down there and fuck around and find out? Not really the best of ideas. Take a sip of Pepsi. One more time, please like the video, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. It is good to be back. He also confirmed, Trump that is, confirmed this month that he had authorized the CIA to begin covert operations in Venezuela. Maduro has been a key component in Trump's efforts to expand his executive authority and take more brazen actions. When Trump, for example, sought to use the Alien Enemies Act to carry out his mass deportation campaign, he cited Maduro as a threat to justify the use of wartime law. And maybe they might mention it here, but if they don't, I'll get into what that kind of reminded me to say. Maduro has masterminded a quote unquote invasion of the U.S. by Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Trump and his officials have argued without providing proof. But a recent intelligence reports from the U.S. government contradict that claim. In May, a declassified memo from the office of the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, basically, found no evidence that Maduro is directing the gang. So the one thing I do want to talk about here as well is that from the Trump administration, they've even admitted that Maduro has been complying with deportation flights and he hasn't been fighting them on accepting refugees from Venezuela. So why are they lying? They're lying publicly and they're lying to you about why they're doing these strikes. You're getting dog walked into another regime change if you support this policy. This is not good. We don't want any more. I thought we didn't want any more regime change wars, but we're like walking right into one. What the heck are we doing? A death trap. Sorry. Similarly, Trump has accused Petro, Colombia's president, of allowing illicit drugs to flow out of his country. Colombia has long been the world's largest producer of coca, the raw ingredient for cocaine and other products. Calling Petro a thug and a bad guy, Trump warned on Wednesday he would consider taking action against the outgoing Colombian leader who's slated to leave office in 2026. He better watch it or we'll take very serious action against him and his country, Trump said. What he has led his country into is a death trap. Petro responded shortly afterwards on social media platform Twitter. I'm not going to call it X, it's Twitter, threatening to sue Trump and his officials for in a U.S. court for slander. I will always be against genocide and assassinations of power in the Caribbean, he wrote. A former left wing rebel, Petro styled himself as a prominent critic of Trump among world leaders. He and Trump have clashed repeatedly over deportations and ongoing war on drugs. And if you have someone like this not listening and not, taking their citizens back if they're flying into the country, which I don't know that much about the Colombian situation, basically Colombians coming into the country, but if they are, then they should take their residents back if the US is trying to deport them. And basically, the US should send them back. And if they don't accept them, okay, cut aid, and maybe not sanctions, but figure something out. Like we have plenty of different avenues other than just bombing places. I mean, it seems to work for other countries. They can figure things out without having to blow people up. Jesus. Um, while Trump argued in a recent memo to the U.S. Congress that drug traffickers were unlawful combatants, Petro has maintained that some of the victims of the U.S. bombing campaign were little more than fishermen. Fisherman Alejandro Carranza had no ties to drug trafficking, and his daily activity was fishing, Petro wrote on social media last week, highlighting the case of one Colombian man reportedly killed in the strikes. Petro then accused the U.S. government of committing crimes. U.S. government officials have committed murder and violated our sovereignty in territorial waters. I think that's it for this article. So that is that for that article. One more time, please, everyone, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going to run an ad real quick and we will get right back into the show in just 1 minute. All right, we're going to take a second today to chill and tell you about the show's sponsors, Tiger Fitness. Make sure you go to the link below to get all the supplements that I use day in, day out, and beyond. As I always say, you do not need supplements to become all jacked and tan or to progress in your health journey, but they could definitely be a useful tool in that respect. So, as you can see on tigerfitness.com, we got MTS Nutrition, Blackstone Labs, Ambrosia, HPN, Nutrix Research, America Labs, Alani New, Pump Chasers, there's Redcon One, Accent Sledge, plenty of different companies that pretty much have absolutely any supplement you could possibly think of: pre-workouts, fat burners, BCAAs, electrolyte mixes, you name it, it's on there. So go to Tiger Fitness through the link below. Use code Kyle at checkout to let them know that I sent you. Get your protein powder, you name it, anything that's going to help you stick to your diet and hopefully achieve your health goals. All right, thanks. Back to the show. All right, so getting back into the stuff on Venezuela, let's talk about this bipartisan bill that Rand Paul and I guess some Democrats, which they got to quit being useless every once in a while, are trying to push through. Hold on, let me add that to the stage and put me right here. Bipartisan bill in the Senate would block Trump from going to war with Venezuela. The War Powers Resolution was introduced by Senators Tim Kaine, Rand Paul, and Adam Schiff, which Adam Schiff is about as useless as they come. And ding, 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 ding. A bipartisan group of senators has introduced a War Powers Resolution that would block President Trump from attacking Venezuela amid a U.S. bombing campaign against boats in the Caribbean and reports that the administration is preparing to strike Venezuelan territory. The legislation was introduced by Senators Tim Kaine, a Democrat from Virginia, Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, and Adam Schiff, a Democrat from California, and would require congressional authorization before the U.S. went to war with Venezuela. Which, I mean, this kind of is just like the constitutional position that you have to have an authorization from Congress to declare war. The legislation was introduced by Senator. Oh, I'm sorry. I already read that. I'm extremely troubled that the Trump administration is considering launching illegal military strikes inside Venezuela without a specific authorization by Congress, Kaine said in a statement on the bill. Americans don't want to send their sons and daughters into more wars, especially wars that carry a serious risk of significant destabilization and massive new waves of migration into our hemisphere. I hate to say it, Kaine's right. The Democrats right about something. How often is that? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Anyways, Paul said, the American people do not want to be dragged into endless war with Venezuela without a public debate or a vote. We ought to defend what the Constitution demands: deliberation before war. The resolution was introduced on October 17th and will force a vote within 10 days, meaning it could happen as early as next week. Americans can contact their senators and urge them to support SJ Res 90. The bill comes as the U.S. continues escalating its military campaign in the Caribbean by bombing more alleged drug running boats. And U.S. officials have been clear that the real goal of the military campaign in the Caribbean is the ousting of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. President Trump recently confirmed that he authorized the CIA to conduct covert operations inside Venezuela and that his administration was considering striking Venezuela by land. So I think I forgot to mention that this is from antiwar.com, which is a very, very good resource for anybody that wants to stay informed on anything foreign policy. I listen to Dave DeCamp's show every single day. I try to never miss a show, and I normally don't, but I use it to keep up with a lot of this stuff, and I will be using it a lot going forward. So yeah, this bill is important, very important. Uh, Earlier this month, the Senate voted on a bill that would have prevented more U.S. strikes on boats without congressional approval, but it failed in a vote of 48 to 51. Paul was one of the only two Republicans who supported the measure, as he has been very critical of the bombing campaign. Paul said this week that the extrajudicial executions at sea go against all of our tradition, arguing that when the U.S. kills someone, you really need to know someone's name. At least you have to accuse them of something. The Trump administration has offered no evidence to back up its claim about who it has been bombing and what the boats were carrying. You have to present evidence, Paul said. So all these people who have been blown up without us knowing their name, without any evidence of a crime. And this article, just to make it clear, was by our dear friend of the show, and personal friend of mine, Dave DeCamp. So make sure you go support him and support the show and support this bill. I don't know if a vote tomorrow would be 10 days. So um hopefully it passes, because I think I speak for everybody when I say we don't want to be in another war, especially not with Venezuela. So, anyways, let's talk about this whole Argentina bailout. So, I've been hearing a lot about this. They said it was $20 billion, and I heard $40 billion, and then people said it's a currency exchange. There's a lot going on there. I've been, I would like to believe, pretty reasonable about Milei. Milei is the president of Argentina, who is a self-described anarcho-capitalist, and of course, everybody's seen him, with these goofy sideburns, making out with his wife, waving a black and yellow flag, um, and slashing regulations and doing some things that seem to be making life for the average Argentinian better. But then also there's some odd stuff where he's kind of selling off a lot of land to the International Monetary Fund. And I'm a little skeptical of some of this stuff. And perhaps I think I do owe it to my audience and to other people to maybe have somebody on who's a little bit better informed about Malay. I know Jose Nino, another friend of the show, had wrote some stuff about him, but I'd kind of like to get both ends. So the pro Malay end and the anti Malay end. So I got this article from Reuters, and we're going to talk about this and discuss what the hell is going on with this. So U.S. banks hunting for collateral to back 20 billion Argentina bailout. The Washington Journal reports. This article was dated almost a week ago, so maybe there's some updates. As far as I know, I have not seen any. A group of U.S. banks, including JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Goldman Sachs, is hesitant to lend $20 billion to Argentina without guarantees or collateral, the Wall Street Journal reported on Monday. Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, said last week that the department was working with banks and investment funds to create a $20 billion facility to invest in South America's country's sovereign debt. Bankers are waiting on guidance from the Treasury Department on what collateral Argentina would be able to provide for them, or if Washington would plan to backstop the facility on its own, the report said, citing people familiar with the matter. The loan facility has not been finalized and might not come together if the bank's collateral question is not resolved, the report said. Discussions on this facility remain ongoing, and we look forward to sharing more details once these talks are complete, a U.S. Treasury spokesperson told Reuters. Goldman Sachs declined comment, while JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Citigroup did not respond to Reuters' request for comment. Argentina Central Bank said on Monday it signed a $20 billion exchange rate stabilization agreement with the U.S. Department, providing a total of $40 billion in U.S. support for Latin America's third largest economy. The Treasury has also bought Argentine pesos in the open market. The U.S. facilities are also raising the possibility of a conflict between the IMF and the Treasury Department, with officials from the fund concerned that the Trump administration could pressure Argentina to put the U.S. liabilities ahead of the IMF's sizable loans. The Washington Journal report said. So, as I said, I think actually, um, Tommy, I believe when I had Anya Parampil on, which I mentioned my show with her a little bit earlier, we talked about this very, very briefly. And I think she's better informed on me than this, which is not very, very difficult. But that Malay had been allowing the IMF to invest a lot in Argentina, and I think this is the Trump administration's attempt to once again kind of expand their influence in South America by buying up and getting collateral from Argentina. So basically, they could say, like, hey, remember how we bought all this debt off of you? Well, we want to return on our investment. You have to keep out China, you have to keep out all these other actors from being invested in our hemisphere. Tommy, I don't know about that. I got the beard line. I could maybe do it. I mean, I don't have the hair for it anymore. You could kind of see my hairline right there, but it's definitely not what it once was. Anyways, let me continue on here. I don't think I could. I think you need hair to do the sideburns. The U.S. facilities, Argentina Central Bank said on Monday it signed a $20 billion. Okay, I already read that. U.S. facilities are also raising the possibility of a conflict between the IMF and the Treasury Department, with officials from the fund concerned the Trump administration. I read that too. Geez, IMF did not immediately respond to Reuters' request for comment. So what it seems like to me, as I said, is basically the US is trying to gain influence in the South America region because they realize that Brazil and other the Pompadour, um, other countries are starting to kind of move in and make ties with South America. I think the Trump administration kind of wants to reverse this, but it seems like they're just not going about it in the best ways. Because I think once again, trying to do regime change in Venezuela, probably not a good idea to get the people on your side because we see how regime change goes in most other places. What the hell is a pompadour? You're distracting me. I'll have to look that up after the show. But yeah, I don't see myself ever kind of growing the hair back out just because I think I pull bald off pretty well. Maybe I don't. Maybe that's up for debate, but neither here nor there. The Trump administration, I think, is looking to expand its influence in South America, and they want to basically ratchet it back away from China, Iran, and Russia, and basically keep it for themselves. Which, like I said, I'm not against in theory. I'm all for countries having their sphere of influence, sphere of security, and all that good stuff. I like Jeffrey Sachs' idea of a sphere of security, and I would consider that South America is part of that. China doesn't have like military base or anything like that. They have a listening post in I think it's Cuba that's been there since 2002, 2004. If they really want any information, they don't need a listening post. They could probably easily get it. And as I talked about, I did a podcast about TikTok forever ago. Now TikTok sold off to Larry Ellison and BlackRock, so you don't have to worry about that. They're basically going to throw you off if you criticize Israel, which who knows how much longer my TikTok will stay up. And I don't even really use TikTok. My wife sends me videos, I watch them, I get rid of it. I post videos up on there every here and there. Really don't spend a lot of time on TikTok. But yeah, they're basically trying to maintain as much influence and power over South America as possible because once again, they feel this is our sphere. We should have influence over here, which is completely reasonable. So who knows what's going to happen with Venezuela? I just want to put it out there. I'm completely against sending money to other countries because we have enough problems on our own shores. We don't need to try to fix problems elsewhere. I did hear a Brazilian lady talk about actions in Venezuela, and she was supportive. I do think there's a revival of the Monroe Doctrine and getting the U.S. focused on our backyard rather than the Middle East. Yeah, I mean, I wish that was true, but it seems like we're not doing either. Uh, a Brazilian lady supporting actions in Venezuela, it would depend. Like a lot of these people, when they flee their own country, they tend to come here and then demand that the US does something about problems in their home, which to me is just like the most bizarre thing in the world. And I think you should be deported immediately if you're supporting the US taking actions in other countries rather than fixing the US. I'm not quite the best person to talk about this kind of stuff, but back 100 years ago when people would immigrate to the US, they abandoned everything. They abandoned their language, their heritage, and they became Americans. People now come here to the US and then want the US to do things just for them, not because they're Americans, but because they feel they're entitled to the treasury. I mean, you're supposed to come here and earn your pay, earn your keep, and then become a part of the culture, become a part of the country, become a part of the nation, and you are now an American. You don't get to advocate for your country. And that goes for any country, not just Israel, not just Ukraine, any country. If you leave your country and you come to America, you need to think you are an American now if you want to be a part of this country. In my opinion, we need to have an immigration moratorium. And now, if you're here, okay, well, we give you a path to citizenship some way, somehow. But if you have any inkling that you have loyalty to another country, then why are you here? Because this country should be for Americans. America should be for Americans. Ukraine should be for Ukrainians. Russia should be for Russians. China should be for Chinese. This isn't hard. Um, but anyways, yeah, they could be whoever could be supportive of actions in Venezuela. But I mean, it's been very, very clear from the first Trump administration until now that said actions have not worked. You had a massive outflow of immigrants from Venezuela because of the coup attempt, Operation Gideon back in 2019, and the massive sanction campaign. Americans aren't any better off for it. I certainly don't think anybody is. So let me now move into the section about Russia and Ukraine. So I was told by plan trusters and people who think that well-intentioned people, I should say, and I do believe they're well-intentioned, that we just need to trust Trump on this one, and that he was going to solve the war in Ukraine on day one, which I kind of knew was bullshit. I think anyone who had any idea about history kind of knew this was bullshit. This is just Trump puffing his chest. Trump says he did not want to he did not want wasted they have this worded fucked up. Trump says he did not want wasted meeting after a plan he should said a wasted meeting after a plan for Putin talks shelved. Donald Trump says he did not want a wasted meeting after a plan to have face-to-face talks with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin about the war in Ukraine was put on hold. The U.S. president indicated that a key sticking point remained Moscow's refusal to cease fighting along the current front line in remarks at the White House on Tuesday. Why we're still trying to do anything with Ukraine, I don't know. Trump had a very, very good window when he first got elected to basically just say, all right, that was Biden's mess. We're moving on. Sorry, we can't help you. We're focusing on America. He could have did it. And I think people would have largely fall behind it. People would still probably fall behind it if he said that he didn't want to help Ukraine anymore. Surprisingly, a lot of people are silent about the fact that we're now more involved in Ukraine than we were before. I pointed this out many times on the show, but I mean, it's worth reiterating because we're going to cover that now they've put more sanctions on Russia. Um, I was told after the last talks that, oh, well, you need to trust, and if something changes, then oh, you have to admit you're wrong and all this stuff. But I don't know, man. We're 9 months into Trump's presidency, and once again, the war in Ukraine is now going worse. We're more involved. We've sent more money, more weapons, more intelligence, and now there's more sanctions on Russia than Biden had on. And for some reason, the Trump supporters never bring this up. Of course, the Democrats don't bring it up because hey, we want to send more weapons and intelligence and all that stuff over to Ukraine. When I think the reasonable position and the position that Trump had in the campaign was the right position. We shouldn't be involved and we should just be a party to help peace. Right now, we're a party to help Ukrainians and Russian side. And Trump has admitted in private that he knows that Ukraine can't win the war. Although now he said publicly that he thinks that he could take back some territory. And we're talking about sending tomahawks there. I'm skeptical that they'll actually do it. But if they do, I mean, why? Why? Anyways, the U.S. president indicated that a key sticking. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that already. Earlier, White House officials said that there were no plans for Trump-Putin meeting in the immediate future after Trump said on Thursday that the two would hold talks in Budapest within 2 weeks. Key differences between the U.S. and Russian proposals for peace became increasingly clear this week, appearing to have dashed chances of a summit. And by the way, I do like that you always see guitar ads here. Trump and Putin last met in Alaska in August during a hastily organized summit, which yielded no concrete results. Basically, I think the meeting in Alaska was just kind of like I don't want to say about face. I want to say it was more of like a positive propaganda piece for both Trump and Putin because they got to shake hands. They got a bunch of pictures. I did like Putin's faces during us when the reporters were starting to harass him. He kind of did like one of these. I wish I got I think I might have a picture of it somewhere. But anyways, it's very, very funny. I do really, really like that. Just Putin to me, yeah, he's a cold-blooded killer. Yeah, he used to be what the hell is it? Whatever their intelligence is, not MI6. I wish I remembered it, but I don't. I've made this point plenty of times before that like when you listen to Putin or Xi talk, these guys have a deep knowledge and understanding of their country, their history. They really like rose up through the ranks. Like they're legitimate KGB. Thank you. Thank you. That's it. But they really rose up through the ranks and really made themselves into impressive people before they became leaders of their country. You just don't get that from Trump, Biden, Obama, George Bush. Like Trump maybe a little bit more I should say less so than the others that I mentioned because he's a real estate mogul, a TV show host, and just he's not like anybody. He's hilarious. He's such just a character in so many respects and has like this bigger than life personality. But like that he doesn't know anything about anything. Or then he's the greatest at anything. Just ask him, he'll tell you. But when you listen to Putin or Xi talk, they're impressive people. We don't have that here in the West. It's sad, but it's true. Like it's I hate to kind of be like the, shitting on America meme, but like come on, man. Anyways, let me get this back up here. Zoom in a little bit so you guys can read along. The White House decision to shelve plans for a second Trump Putin meeting may be seen as an attempt to avoid another similar scenario. I guess the Russians wanted too much, and it became evident for the Americans that there will be no deal for Trump in Budapest, a senior European diplomat told Reuters. Now, when I start hearing senior European diplomats, I'm always skeptical because the Europeans, I think Trump's trying to put them in a different position. And I think basically what their goal is to kind of hand off these conflicts to different US satellites or US partners in the world. So like I think Trump wants the Europeans to raise their spending on defense. um I think Trump wants to basically hand off I shouldn't just say Trump, but like the US now wants to hand off a lot of these conflicts to different satellites. So like basically the US wants to have Israel handle hegemony in the Middle East. Like Israel is going to be the unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. And then they're going to want to use the EU to keep Russia at bay and deter them. So that's why Trump wants the EU to increase weapon defense spending, which he has successfully done, really, and also have Ukraine, soak up some of that as well and then have South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, and all those countries over there. And it used to be India, but India's kind of sitting on the fence right now to handle China, and the US will directly confront China. They're just not able to do it because we can't pull out of these conflicts. We keep getting more and more and more involved. So that the EU is going to have to shoulder a lot of this um, conflict with Russia. Do I think Russia actually wants anything to do with anything beyond Ukraine? No, because if they wanted to, then they would have did more than that. But part of the Russian war strategy right now is to basically draw all Ukrainian or like a lot of the Ukrainian military resources out of their home and more towards Russia, so that way they can help bleed them dry. Basically, soak all the EU money and US money into Ukraine and then just bleed them dry. That's the or the Ukraine. Jeez, the Russian strategy is to basically bleed the US and the EU dry. Seemingly it's working. I know Russia's probably sustaining some losses, but let's face it, the Ukrainians are sustaining way more losses. The EU really isn't sustaining that many losses other than just, money. But, if things are going according to the way that some of the planners are saying that, uh, the Jerome Powell and Scott Bessent are basically really fucking the EU, then hey, maybe this is beneficial to both the US and Russia to have I hate to say it, but Ukrainians die while the EU just floods them with money and weapons. Anyways, let's get back to the story here. A preparatory meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was due to be held this week, but the White House said that the two had a productive call and that a meeting was no longer necessary. On Monday, Trump embraced a ceasefire proposal backed by Kiev and European leaders to freeze the conflict along the current front line. Let it be cut the way it is, he said. I said, cut and stop at the battle line, go home, stop fighting, stop killing people. Russia has repeatedly pushed back against freezing the current line of contact. I think it's because, once again, if you're winning, why would you stop? I don't think that Trump was a famous line from when Trump basically dressed down Zelensky, which ultimately that whole dress down led to really nothing. Uh, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. Without us, you have none. The US and the EU have no cards when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. What are they going to do? Start sending in the US to fight Russia? That'd be insane. And I don't think Trump wants to do that. And I don't think, any US soldiers want to do that either. So basically, they have one choice. Either Russia just gets to do what Russia wants, or you can keep, the status quo, which seems to be what they're willing to do. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said the idea that had been put to Russians repeatedly, but that the consistency of the Russia's position doesn't change, referring to Moscow's insistence that the complete withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from the embattled eastern regions. And if you listen to Pete Quinones talk about this, and I think he's right, I think a lot of this does kind of boil down to a ethnic blood feud between the Ukrainians. Yeah. What's funny is that I've never heard the Shane Gillis impersonating Trump. My one coworker always tells me about it, and everyone says that his Trump impersonation is very, very good. I fully admit I'm not a good Trump impersonator. I'll leave that to the Jackmans and apparently Shane Gillis. Um, if you are basically Ukraine and Russia is an ethnic blood feud right now because the eastern territories of Ukraine have a lot of ethnic Russians, and there's a lot of ethnic, Ukrainians and Jewish Ukrainians that feel they don't want to be part of Russia. So the battle's drawn. Moscow was only interested in long-term sustainable peace, Sergei Lavrov said on a Tuesday, implying that freezing the front line would only amount to a temporary ceasefire. The root cause of the conflict need to be addressed, Lavrov said, using the Kremlin shorthand for a series of maximalist demands that include recognition of the full Russian sovereignty over the Donbass, as well as the demilitarization of Ukraine, a non-starter for Kiev and its European partners. Which I get it, but I think they probably, well, not at this point, but if they would have just not sent Boris Johnson over there to cancel out the talks, things probably could have been pretty productive had they not, went all in on this war. And Trump probably could have got a little bit more results had he not continued the war. This is voluntary on his part, and Trump has now chosen to continue to escalate the war. So at this point, it doesn't there's nothing else that they could really do to really de-escalate other than just basically say, we're done. We can't do anything else here. So as you can see on the map here, let me get over there. Um, just why would Russia stop? It doesn't make any sense. European leaders released a statement with Zelensky earlier on Tuesday saying that any talks on ending the war in Ukraine should start with freezing the current front line and accuse Russia of not being serious about peace. Zelensky said discussions about the front line were the beginning of diplomacy, which Russia was doing everything to avoid. The only topic that could make Moscow pay attention was the supply of long range weapons to Ukraine, he added. And of course, he says that because he wants to continue fighting and he wants the US to supply them more weapons. The only topic, Trump had discussed at a summit in the Hungarian capital over the phone with Putin a day before the meeting. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House. Some reports suggested those talks had been a shouting match, with sources suggesting Trump had pushed Zelensky to give up large areas of territory in the eastern regions of Donetsk and Luhansk, known collectively as the Donbass, as part of the deal with Russia, which I think he's going to have to do. However, Zelensky has always said that Ukraine cannot relinquish parts of the Donbass, as it still holds on the grounds that Russia could later use that as an area as a springboard for further attacks. Putin's unscheduled call with Trump last Thursday came following speculation that the U.S. was preparing to send long range Tomahawk missiles to Kiev that could potentially strike deep into Russia, which would just be absolutely insane. Zelensky said it was the Tomahawk issue that had forced Russia to engage in the discussion, which to me doesn't seem true at all because it seems like they've been willing to talk the entire time. Despite coming away from the White House empty handed, he added that the talk about the missiles had turned out to be a strong investment in diplomacy. So that is it for that article. One more time, hopefully everybody's doing well. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the return, for me at least. It's good to be back with all you guys and discussing such important topics. One more time, make sure you like, subscribe, and if you can, share it wherever you can. I think this is going to be kind of the way I do shows from here on out, is just, if I have a guest, cool. If not, we're just going to do it this way. So, as I was saying about the Trump administration being more now embroiled in the war, uh, it's really where we are right now. Okay, hold on. I'm going to run an ad real quick because I got to pull something up. Here you go. All right, guys, we are going to take a quick break from the show to tell you about the show's sponsor. We are now brought to you by Fox and Sons Coffees. You can see right here, I got the Den Blend Dark. Really enjoy that. I've been drinking a lot of their Brazil Honey Prep. Right here, as you can hear, there's not a lot of beans left in it because I've been drinking it quite a bit. Just tell you a little bit about Fox and Sons, why I support them and why you should too, is that Stephen had started the company up in Michigan to help teach his son about entrepreneurship. I'm all about that, and I do firmly believe that in order to spread liberty in our lifetimes, we have to support those who support similar values as us. And Stephen does support all the same libertarian values that I bring and talk about on the show a lot. So go to foxandsons.com, use code Kyle at checkout to get 15% off of orders $25 or more, and there's always free shipping whenever you place an order that is more than $37.99. Find their coffee absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure you will too. So one more time, put that BBC in your mouth. Yes, exactly. Okay. Another one from antiwar.com, another one by our dear friend Dave DeCamp. Putin brushes off new U.S. sanctions, issues warning on Tomahawk missiles. So let me hit that. Putin brushes off the sanctions, which isn't really a surprise because I think they have over like 30,000 sanctions on Russia at this point. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Thursday brushed off the new sanctions imposed by the U.S. targeting two Russian oil companies and issued a new warning against the potential supply of U.S. Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. Regarding new sanctions, first of all, there's nothing new about it. Yes, they're serious for us and may have certain consequences, but they will not significantly impact our economic health, Putin said, according to the Russian news agency. TASS. The Trump administration called on Russia to end its war in Ukraine, and when it issued sanctions and threatened more would be coming if the conflict continued. But the measures are unlikely to have much impact since Russia has been under heavy Western sanctions for years and is prepared to face more. God, look at that. Putin also said the sanctions harm U.S.-Russia relations. Speaking about the political part, then certainly this is an unfriendly act against Russia, is an obvious thing, and it does not strengthen U.S. or Russia-U.S. relations that have just started recovering. Certainly, the U.S. administration harms Russia-U.S. relations by such actions. Discussing the possibility of the U.S. providing Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles, Putin said any Ukrainian Tomahawk strikes would be met with an overwhelming response. If Russian territory is hit with such weapons, the response will be very serious, if not outright overwhelming. So like I said, I'm not sure that they would go for it, but if they did, man, not cool. Not cool. I just, like I said, I'm not sure that they would actually do this, but man, President Trump appears to have cooled on the idea of supplying Ukraine with Tomahawks, which are nuclear capable and have a range of over 1,000 miles. The problem with the Tomahawk is a lot of people don't know it'll take a minimum of 6 months, usually a year, to learn how to use. He told reporters on Wednesday. The only way a Tomahawk is going to be shot is if we shot it. According to media reports, the U.S. has been supporting long range Ukrainian drone strikes and missile attacks on Russian territory. Trump denied a Wall Street Journal report that said he was backing the missile strikes, but Ukraine's military claimed it used British provided Storm Shadow missiles in an attack on Russian chemical plant, which requires US targeting data. So I think that's it for the Russia Ukraine stuff that I have for today's show. I do have more Israel stuff. Uh, but that being said, I have a very, very hard time believing that they're not aware that these strikes are going on, being that the US provides all the intelligence. And the same deal with like the Israel stuff, which we're going to cover here in a minute. Uh, if you've been involved in this war now for almost 3 years, actually over 3 years, geez, almost 4 years, I have a very, very hard time, especially with all the weapons we send all over the world, because the US is the second largest manufacturing country in the entire world. I don't think a lot of people realize that. But what we manufacture is not what China manufactures. We manufacture weapons. China manufactures stuff like this, probably stuff like this, my Focusrite, the sound bar, all the stuff around me. Probably some degree of the technology was manufactured in China. So while China's busy, I hate to say it, and people are gonna get mad at this, but raising everybody's living standards by sending them affordable goods, we make everybody's living standards worse off by creating inflation and sending money to arms manufacturers to blow up children in the Middle East and people in Russia. Sorry, is what it is. So, anyways, pivoting over to now Israel and JD Vance, I wanted to start with actually, yeah, we'll start with this story, another one from Dave DeCamp over at antiwar.com. Here we go. Vance and Netanyahu deny that Israel is a protectorate state of the US. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on Wednesday denied that Israel was a protectorate state or vassal of the U.S. after being questioned about the growing criticism of the U.S.-Israel relationship and Israel's reliance on the U.S. military aid. Well, I want to put it very clear. 1 week they say that Israel controls the United States. A week later, they say that the United States controls Israel. This is hogwash, Netanyahu told reporters at his office in Jerusalem before holding a meeting with Vance. We have a partnership and an alliance of partners who share common values and common goals. We can have discussions, we can have disagreements here and there, but on the whole, I have to say that over the past year, we have had agreement, the Israeli leader added. And as you could see, JD Vance sitting there with war criminal himself, should be in prison for life, Benjamin Netanyahu. Um, I think people get carried away when it comes to this whole conversation because I do believe that this kind of goes both ways. Um, I do believe the US has influence over Israel, and I believe that Israel has influence over the United States. I believe Israel is probably closer to something of a vassal state of the US, which they could deny that all they want, but that they act in our interest and our interests largely align because, once again, the US wants to have hegemony over the Middle East, and Israel is a good means of doing that. That being said, where you see that Israel has a lot of influence over the United States is in regards to when both Biden and Trump tell Netanyahu and Israel not to do something, and they do it, and nothing happens. If they are, and they are, the largest recipient of US foreign aid, then we should be able to have some pull and get them to stop doing things when we tell them stop. But as you can see, they don't. Trump ordered them to stop killing once the ceasefire went into effect, which that was here and gone. um, but they don't listen. They still do what they want to do. So who's really pulling the strings here? And as I've talked about ad nauseum on this show, we have speech laws forbidding you from criticizing the Israeli government. If you work in the US government, it is illegal for you to criticize the Israeli government. You could be fined for that, which is just mind-boggling. Any any person in the United States, just why would you not question that? So you're more likely to get deported from the United States if you're an illegal citizen. If you criticize Israel, than you are the United States, which just to me is just the craziest shit in the world. So I don't think it's quite accurate. I know when I see people, and I occasionally say it too, I just get carried away and I enjoy talking shit, to say that Benjamin Netanyahu or Israel controls Trump or that the United States completely controls Israel. It's a mutual relationship, but as far as I could tell, I think the Israelis have a lot more leeway in this relationship than I think they should because they get to do whatever they want, regardless of what the US wants. And once again, they have speech laws here in the United States. As far as I know, there's no laws in Israel forbidding, Israelis from criticizing the United States. So, anyways, I'll continue reading from this article here. Addressing the question, Vance said, "We don't want a client state, and that's not what Israel is. We want a partnership. We want an ally here." The U.S. vice president also appeared to respond to the criticism of the U.S. monitoring Gaza ceasefire and the slew of high level U.S. officials visiting Israel this week. U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff and his advisor Jared Kushner were also in Israel this week, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will make a trip on Friday. It's not about monitoring in the sense of you monitor a toddler. It's about monitoring in the sense of there's a lot of work, a lot of good people who are doing that work. It's important for the principals and the administration to keep ensuring that our people are doing what we need them to do. The New York Times reported on Wednesday that according to Trump officials, there is concern within the administration that Netanyahu may vacate the ceasefire deal and that the strategy is for Vance, Kushner, and Witkoff to prevent him from starting the full-scale bombing campaign in Gaza. And this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier that basically they'll do what they want. And they did. They broke the ceasefire and they started killing more Palestinians. I think since that whole ceasefire deal was agreed upon, they've killed about 100 Palestinians. Where credit to Trump where it's due, because before that, I'm pretty sure weeks leading up to that, every single day you would see an article of about 70 to 100 Palestinians killed a day. Per day. They were killing 70 to 100 Palestinians per day. In the week, they killed about 100. That's still way too many, but it's progress in the right direction. All against what the Trump administration wanted. The U.S. military has established a monitoring center in southern Israel where it's expected to deploy about 200 troops. During his visit to Israel, Vance issued warnings to Hamas about violating the truce and hasn't raised Israel's repeated violations, which include attacks in Gaza that have killed at least 88 Palestinians and continued restrictions on aid. Which my understanding is they had allowed a lot more aid than was going in previously, but still just not enough. So, now that I'm done with that story, let's continue on. And this will be the last story of the day. Let me pull this up here. Here we go. Map of Gaza shows where Israeli forces are positioned under ceasefire deal. So, I don't know if I've covered this on the show at any point, but there have been multiple reports in, I think, Haaretz, the Times of Israel, the Jerusalem Post, where IDF soldiers have basically described what they call an invisible, I think it's a yellow line, where they describe a invisible line where they tell Palestinians, or they don't tell Palestinians, they lay out aid, and then if Palestinians move past this invisible line, they shoot them and kill them. Absolute barbarism is what that is. I don't know if they're still doing that. I believe they are, but I believe they also have now marked lines. So now if you cross a visual line instead of an imaginary line, Israelis will shoot you and kill you. Satellite imagery shows Israel holds about 40 active military positions beyond the yellow line. Satellite imagery, and this is from Al Jazeera. Satellite imagery analysis by Al Jazeera's fact-checking agency Sanad shows that the Israeli army holds about 40 active military positions in the part of Gaza Strip outside the yellow line, the invisible boundary established under the first phase of the ceasefire to which its troops had to move according to the deal. The images also show that Israel is upgrading several of these facilities, which help it maintain its occupation of the 58% of Gaza, even after the pullback of troops to the yellow line. While the majority of these sites are concentrated in southern Gaza, every governorate hosts at least one military position. Some sites are built on bases established during the war, while others are newly constructed. The total number of sites in each governorate is North Gaza 9, Gaza City 6, Darabala 1, Khan Yunis 11, and Rafah 13. Israel's war in Gaza, as you could see. For those listening, basically in North Gaza, they have these little red lines here, and you can count all 9 sites. Gaza City, you count 6. Darabala, 1 site. Khan Yunis, 11. And Rafah, 13. And if you look all along here, they show the different sites. If you're just listening, feel free to go to the show or go to Al Jazeera and look up a map of Gaza shows where Israeli forces are positioned under ceasefire deal. Satellite imagery analysis by Al Jazeera Sanad fact-checking agency shows the Israeli army maintaining about 40 active military positions in the part of Gaza outside of the yellow line, the boundary established under the first phase of the ceasefire. One of the most prominent military points in Gaza City is located on top of Al Muntar Hill in the Shajaya neighborhood of Gaza City. A comparison of images between September 21st and October 14th show the base being paved and asphalted. Where's the invisible yellow line? Since the ceasefire took effect about 2 weeks ago, nearly 100 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks across the strip, with some attacks occurring near the yellow line. On October 18th, Israeli forces killed 11 members of the Abu Shaban family in the Zaytun neighborhood of Gaza City, according to Gaza's civil defense. 7 children and 3 women were among those killed, and the Israeli military fired on the vehicle as the family attempted to return home to inspect it, which just absolute barbarism. They always say Zionists will always say it's the most moral army in the world, but I don't know, man. You don't kill defenseless women and children in a car. That's not very moral to me. And people always bring up leaflets, which to me is just like the dumbest point. Um, I don't know how dropping a leaflet on a building means that you get to just demolish it. I always liken it to if I tell you or leave a piece of paper on your bed and say, if you're here at a certain time, then I'm going to delete you. Does that make it right? No, everybody would recognize it doesn't make it right. So why does it make it right here in this situation? Like you don't get to just blow up a hospital because you dropped a piece of paper on it. So I'd be okay if there were Hamas members who had legitimately committed crimes against Israel. If they use the military to go in there and either kill them or bring them to justice, I'd be okay with that. But that's never what happens anymore. That hasn't happened in the last 2 years. Anyways, let me get back here. The Israeli military said soldiers who had fired at a suspicious vehicle that had crossed the so-called yellow line with no physical markers for the line. However, many Palestinians cannot determine the location of the invisible boundary. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has since said that the army won't saw visual lines to indicate the line's location. In the first ceasefire phase, Israel retains control of more than half the Gaza Strip, with areas beyond the yellow line still under military presence. This has blocked residents of Beth Lahia, Beit Hanun, and the neighborhoods of Shujaya, Tafa, Zaytun, and most of Khan Yunis, and all of Rafah city from returning home. So, as you can see here, they have the yellow line, and it shows where Israel retains control, which is just the majority of the Gaza Strip. What are the next phases of Trump's 20-point Gaza plan? According to the 20-point plan announced by United States President Donald Trump, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on September 29th, developed without any Palestinian input, Israel is to withdraw its forces in 3 phases, as shown on an accompanying crude map, with each phase marked in a different color. So I actually have not read this yet. So I am curious to finally read this, and hopefully we kind of all learn something. Hopefully there's some good stuff here. Trump's 20-point plan, Gaza plan. The United States President Donald Trump has proposed a 20-point peace plan to end the war in Gaza after holding talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, which honestly, I am kind of surprised. There's something very, very odd to me about the fact that Trump has actually been better on Israel than on the war in Ukraine. Like he has actually taken more of an active step in trying to end the war in Gaza than he has in Ukraine, which he campaigned very, very hard on ending the war in Ukraine, but has now only ramped it up. Um, but in Gaza, he's actually working. I gotta say, like a little bit harder than he is in Ukraine to end the war in Gaza. Now, do I think it's going to work? No, because the Israelis are absolutely nuts and they don't want to end the war. They want total control of the strip. Um, and I don't think Trump will really fight him on it. He's an old boomer who just doesn't really care. If there's any resistance anywhere, anytime, Trump just kind of puts his hands up and says, "All right, that's it. I'm good." So, anyways, let me zoom in a little bit so we can read this. Um, the summary of the 20 points: Gaza will become a de radicalized terror free zone, which you're just not going to do. Gaza will be redeveloped to improve life for its people. The war ends immediately once both sides agree with Israeli withdrawal to an agreed upon line of ceasefire. All captives, alive and deceased, return within 72 hours of Israel's acceptance, which even Vance had said that it's going to take some time to get the bodies out because with as much destruction as they did, and they've, used more weapons than all of World War II, um, or they've used more munitions than they used in World War II. I don't know how you can expect them to do that. 5. Israel frees 250 Palestinian life sentence prisoners, 1,700 detainees, and exchange remains proportionally. Hamas members who decommission their weapons get amnesty and safe passage abroad. Full humanitarian aid enters to rebuild essential infrastructure. Aid flows freely from the via the UN and Red Crescent. Rafah crossing reopens under agreement. Gaza governed temporarily by a technocratic Palestinian committee under an international board, including former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and led by Trump, which just is such a non starter. Somebody who is a big proponent of the Iraq war now leading this, as they say, a technocratic Palestinian committee. Ugh. Trump economic plan to rebuild Gaza with global investment and job creation, special economic zone established with favorable trade terms, no forced displacement. People are free to stay, leave, or return. Hamas excluded from governance, all weapons dismantled. Regional partners agree to Hamas compliance and security. International Stabilization Force deployed to secure Gaza and train police, which, like, Hamas being excluded from government and being de radicalized. And, I don't see this happening. International stable. I already read that. Israel won't occupy Gaza, withdraws its stability and demilitarist progress. If Hamas rejects the plan, area handed over from Israeli military to the ISF will proceed. Interfaith dialogue launched to promote values of tolerance and peaceful coexistence. Reforms pave the way for Palestinian self determination, statehood, and the U.S. leads talks for a peaceful political future between Israel and the Palestinians. I just don't know that Israel's really going to be a good faith negotiator in this. And I think everybody who knows anything about the Israeli Palestinian conflict knows that that's just not going to happen. I don't see Hamas laying down their arms and giving up because let's face it, if they've fought this long, then why would they stop now? They're winning the PR war, really. Israelis just aren't good at the whole PR deal. Tim Pool made that observation, and I don't want to say a shill, but he definitely defaults to the Trump administration's line and tries to, keep them all at bay. So the initial withdrawal line in the first phase, Israeli forces pulled back to the line designated in yellow on the map. Hamas has released all living Israeli captives that were in Gaza and most of the dead bodies of captives who passed away in the enclave. The second withdrawal, the red line, during the second phase, an international stabilization force will be mobilized to oversee security and support Palestinian policing, while Israeli forces are to retreat to a further line marked in the red, reducing their direct presence in Gaza. Third withdrawal, security buffer zone. In the final phase, Israeli forces are to pull back to a designated security buffer zone, leaving a limited portion of Gaza under Israeli military control, while an international administrative body supervises governance and a transitional period. Even after the third withdrawal phase, Palestinians will be confined to an area which is smaller than before the war, continuing a pattern of Israel's control over Gaza and its people. Many questions remain about how the plan will be implemented and exact boundaries of Palestinian territory, the timing and the scope of Israeli withdrawals, and the role of the ISF, and the long-term implications for Palestinians across Gaza and the occupied West Bank. The plan is also silent on whether Israel gets to continue aerial and sea blockade of Gaza, which has been in place for the past 18 years. So, as you could see from this story here, a lot of the details are still very shaky. We don't know what's exactly going to happen here, and I think it's pretty clear that I think the ceasefire is kind of in the shitter, and Israel's going to keep doing what they're doing. So I think that is all that I have for today's show. This is the longest solo stream I've done to date that I can recall. This is episode number 437, so I've done quite a few of these. So thank you everybody so much for listening. Hopefully it was entertaining and hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I've, made your Sunday afternoon a little bit better. It's good to be back. And like I said, you're going to see me on Twitter now again, just briefly. Definitely not as much as I used to be, but um, yeah, the internet hiatus was good. And I'm definitely going to be taking more of those more often, just because it's a little bit good for the mental health and also just not yucking it up on Twitter all the time. Just, yeah, like I said, it does wonders for your mental health. So, anyways, please make sure you like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Make sure you go to the Great Megalodon, subscribe, and tomorrow I'll be making my return to 5 till midnight. Very excited for that to hang out with all the guys. I feel like I haven't seen them in forever. I miss them. They probably didn't miss me, but hey, it is what it is. So, yeah, this was episode number 437 of the In Liberty and Health podcast. Everybody, thank you so much for your comments. Please consider becoming a subscriber and a channel member. For the lowly price of $2.99 a month, you're going to have more content coming your way. If you do that, but otherwise, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take care.